that nameplate, that would be fantastic. While the candidates are coming up, I'll do my welcome. Welcome and thank you for coming to the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Annual Candidates Forum. My name is Jessica Kaiser. I am the President and CEO of the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce. Today's forum will provide a revealing look at the races of the Anacortes School Board, Port Commission, and City Council, and is put on in partnership with the League of Women Voters. So some rules. Please turn off electronic devices. The forum is being recorded to be shown on Channel 10 and on the City of Anacortes' YouTube channel. We ask that audience members not record the forum. We have invited all candidates from each opposed race. The candidates will be seated next to their opponents in each race jurisdiction. Please hold your applause until the end of each race. The public was solicited for questions prior to the forum to create the prepared panel questions. Once all the panel questions are asked, questions from the audience will then be asked. The audience is encouraged to write their question on the forms provided on the back table. That was when you entered. Then please submit your form to the review committee in the back. Please wave review committee. Fabulous. Before being brought up to the moderator, the questions will be reviewed by the committee for legibility, appropriateness, and duplicity. All accepted questions have to be applicable to all candidates in that race. Introduction statements is where we'll start. In each race, we'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement by each candidate. To maintain the Chamber's reputation of impartiality, the candidate to speak first for each race was chosen by coin flip prior to the start of today's meeting. Following the opening statements, our candidates will be asked a series of questions that were developed by our Government Affairs Committee. Alternating first response positions, each candidate will be given a 2-minute response period to the question posed. After that, the candidates in the second segment of the forum will pose their own questions to their opponents. In this segment, each candidate will have 1 minute to pose their question, and their challenger will have 1 minute to respond. Helping our panelists track their response times is Meg from the Chamber and Chris from League of Women Voters. They will signal when candidates have reached the 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining marks. Let's show them a little sample there. And then when your time is up, if you fail to stop, you will hear this gentle notification that your time is up. So let's begin with the Anacortes School Board candidates. First up for a 2-minute introduction, Edward Barton.
Beautiful. Oh, good Lord. So thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on and to the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce. I'm Ed Barton. I'm running for school board because the Anacortes School District faces a couple challenges which I think I'm uniquely positioned to help solve. The first is we've seen a significant decrease in enrollment over the last couple years due to COVID and folks maintaining other alternative education pathways like private school, homeschool. In our state, that school enrollment is accompanied by state funding. And the schools are limited as to what they can do to raise their own funds through local levies. As a result, the Anacortes School District is faced with a multi-million-dollar deficit this year and is under-reserved going forward. I've got a background in finance and education. I've got a doctorate in education, a master's in education. I teach at the university level. I also have 30 years of experience as an accountant and as a finance professional. I bring a very unique skill set to the challenges facing the Anacortes School District. What you'll hear tonight is Heather and I care deeply about education. We share a lot of the same positions on issues, And the decision before our community is really which skill set is going to best serve the school district for the next 4 years to overcome those challenges. And I'd like to think that I'd be the candidate that would be able to do that best.
Thank you. And now, introduction from Heather Brennan.
Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate each and every one of you. And I think that when we come to the school board here, what we bring is community service, community involvement, parents, students, staff, everybody collectively having a vision for our school district. And that is my strength coming into this. I've raised my 3 children here. I've been here 37 years now. And I think that the strengths that we bring to the table, both of us, certainly, we have, experience in boards and finances and budgets and fundraising. Those are all necessary items for the school district because, as we know, we're not fully funded by the state. So there's a lot of different areas that we can fill those needs with local levies and funding that we have that you guys all support. So what I'd like to see on the board is to be involved, see what the issues are out there, how we can take the funding that we do have, because we all know we're underfunded, but how we can best address the issues and the needs that we have for our students and our families with the funding that we do have in this community. So for me, moving forward, I want to be more involved in the community, whether that's on the school board or in other ways. I think the school board is a perfect fit for me, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. First question for the school board. What are the major issues you feel need to be addressed by this office? Please explain why you are focusing on these issues, and we will begin with Heather for 2 minutes.
Okay, major issues, obviously funding, support staff. Recently, the difficult decisions of cutting some of the support staff and giving raises to maybe some of the administrators. Trying to explain that in a way that the school district sets out. They strongly feel that the administrators deserved the raise and that they're competitive wages. But we have the support staff who feel like they are being shorted by having funds taken away from them. So I know that they have union negotiations still going on with our support staff, and hopefully they can find some way through this to come to an agreement. The other thing is, of course, attendance and enrollment. So I was at the swim meet. The high school had 170 swimmers at the meet this last Saturday, and one of the parents works for the ESD 189, and she happens to be in enrollment and engagement and attendance. So we're meeting to see what their plan is, because ESD oversees our school districts. So our goal is to get together and see what kind of plan they have for increasing enrollment and attendance in our school district. So I look forward to that. The other one is accepting kids. So let every child know today is Mental Health Day, National Mental Health Day. We want to ensure that kids know they are seen, they're heard, and they're supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward.
So to echo a lot of what Heather said, and I warned you we'd probably align on a lot of these. The first thing is funding and enrollment. The two are tied together. We've got a very unique opportunity to help bridge some of that with Cap Santee High School and the creative and alternative education methods that are utilized there to be able to bring in students that would otherwise potentially be leaving the district. Heather also touched on the labor relations. We've got 5 bargaining units within the Anacortes School District. Each one of those bargaining units is focused on making sure that they get a good deal for their members. And I also believe that they want to make sure that the school district is long-term sustainable. Working collaboratively with those bargaining units, I think, is important in order to be able to deal with our fiscal challenges over the long haul. The third is partnerships. We have a very active community. This is a tight-knit community. One of the strategic plan components for the school district is partnerships. So being able to work with our local government and being able to work with local employers to provide education outside of the classroom, I think, is critically important. That also helps alleviate some of the funding challenges, but it provides real life opportunities for our students to be able to get engaged in their local community. Third is, as a member of the school board, one of the major issues that we need to assist with is to be a consultant for the superintendent. The superintendent is the one employee that we are responsible for hiring and making sure that they're successful. And so serving as a sounding board, as a consultant for the superintendent when he's faced with some of the challenges that he needs to deal with, it's lonely at the top, and I think being able to be a trusted resource and bring a different perspective to bear is going to be useful. And finally, making sure that we get a solid community support for the levy renewal coming up in a couple years so that we can fund some of those unfunded items from the state like transportation and technology.
Thank you. For the second question, Anacortes School District, like many other school districts, is anticipating a budget deficit for the 2023-24 school year and has developed a reduced educational plan to address the budget cuts needed. What parts of this plan do you support or not support? We'll begin with Edward.
So to sit up here and second guess the existing school board, the administration, and the superintendent without being part of the budget development process and understanding the trade-offs is going to be very difficult. So what I'm going to say is I support the decisions that have been made by the school board and the superintendent given a very difficult situation. However, I think that there's alternatives that we should be looking at to try and alleviate some of those funding issues. The first one I had mentioned, how do we get some of the 200 students that we lost during COVID back through promoting the alternative education pathways at Cap Santee High? We may be able to do other things. When the school board met to vote on the budget, one of the questions I asked as a member of the public was, how are we structuring the leases on the computers that we give each of our students so that they don't all come due at the same time, so that we can kind of tranche those out and maybe stretch their life a little bit. Same with our transportation. Those are both areas that the state doesn't really fund at all. And so are there creative ways for us to be able to stretch the dollar a little bit, to be able to make fewer cuts in the library, fewer cuts to ground support, fewer cuts to facilities maintenance, which are also not funded by the state, in order to be able to provide a better education for our youth? And asking those questions during that budgeting process might get us to some better answers.
Thank you. Heather.
Well, he did answer quite a few of those right in there. So that is true when you're not in the room making the budget or approving the budget. It's hard to fine-tune that, why they made the decisions that they did. I do say that the board that we have for the school district are diverse and intelligent and well-educated, and they have nothing but the best for our school district in their hearts. So going forward, they made the tough decisions that they had to make. They are, like I said, they are ongoing. One of the bargaining units is still discussing, so that hasn't been wrapped up. We'll see how that comes out. I do recognize that the grounds crew and the librarians are an issue for a lot of people. So the librarians were actually paraeducators who've been reallocated to different positions. We haven't had librarians in some of our schools other than the middle school and the high school for some years. Those positions were covered by paraeds. And the grounds crew, they're working on negotiating what they can do to regain some of their pay. I do know that the budget cuts we talked about, the school board has talked about keeping the cuts out of the classroom or as far from the classroom as possible. But talking to the paraeducators, they may not feel that that is quite adequate. They feel like they are hands-on in the classroom. And since their time and their positions have been cut, they feel that that's a real focus issue for the school board at this time, to try to get more para-eds back into the school, because they are hands-on with our kids every single day.
Thank you. Next question. How will you support LGBTQ plus students during your term, and how will you deal with constituents who may not agree with your approach? We'll start with Heather.
Well, with this one, I'm going to read from one of the school district quotes here. It says, "The Anacortes School District welcomes and uplifts students of all identities. We affirm that every student is entitled to an educational environment that is safe and free of discrimination, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, as established by state and federal law. We are committed to inclusive practices and policies that support transgender and gender-expansive students with respect to key terms, communication, the use of names and pronouns, student records, confidential health and education information, restroom and locker room accessibility, sports and physical education, dress codes, and other school activities." Now, you might recognize that in our national arena, CRT and LGBTQ issues have come up quite a bit. So I've had questions from the community about transgender males who live as a girl using the girls' bathroom, locker room, things like that. The school has addressed these issues, and they've worked with the students, they have a committee, and I think they're handling this issue really well. I experienced it on the swim team. We have some transgender kids in our athletic arena, and thank you. And I have a daughter who said, I can share this with you, that she's 32, and it took her a month to tell us that she had a girlfriend. But her girlfriend is 30 and has not told her parents yet. So the LGBTQ community, especially students, need extra support and from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward.
What Heather said. So that was a lot of what she was talking about was in policy number 1 for the school board. And the school board's responsibility is really threefold. The first is to hire and fire the superintendent. The second is to approve the curriculum. And the third is to ensure that there's policies put in place for the school district to run and that those policies are adequately funded and supported. The number 1 priority of the school district is to make sure our children get a safe, supported education. That means that we accept our children as they are. We make sure that we have funding adequate to provide counseling and support for those students who feel like they need assistance to get through the day. I also have a daughter who identifies as bisexual. She's not in her 30s, she's in her 20s. And so as a parent, I recognize that she struggled with some of these issues back 10 years ago. And she had to work her way through those things, which required not only the support of her parents, which again, I feel grateful that we were included in that process, but also counseling and support both at school and outside of it. The approach that we need to use with folks who don't agree with our approach or with that approach, because I think that approach is important, that we're supportive of our students, we're supportive of our families, we're supportive of our parents, and that we provide a safe environment for our students to learn, is to listen to those concerns, but recognize if you disagree with that approach, that our number 1 responsibility is to make sure that those children get a good education and that that education is safe and that they feel like they're able to come to school, learn without distraction, which is tough enough as it is, and be able to graduate into our society, which is incredibly diverse, as a functioning adult. And our approach needs to be supporting that process.
Thank you. Next question. Given the federal law from IDEA, Disability and Education Act, requirements upon school districts to keep special ed students in their least restrictive environment, how do you feel Anacortes School District can best meet the needs of our community's diverse learners? We'll begin with Edward.
So again, this starts, everything that we're talking about circles back to resource and circles back to funding. The students who are on IEPs, individualized education programs, require additional support more than just being in the classroom. I had my youngest daughter has a learning disability. The reason why you're hearing me talk about both my daughters, by the way, is the main reason I'm sitting here in front of you today. Each one of them struggled their way through school from K through, in one case, through 12 and is now out. The other one is still finishing up high school. Our approach needs to be one of making sure that the funding cuts that we're making, the funding cuts that are being imposed on us by the state due to our lower enrollment, don't impact those students that are on IEP, don't impact those students that need the additional support in order to be successful. The thought that we can push everybody through our schools like they're a factory is something that probably should have left the system 40 years ago when I was going through it. Each one of our children has individual learning needs and individual learning requirements, and those students who are struggling with disabilities, both physical, emotional, and learning disabilities, need the support not only of their parents, and their parents need to be involved in those decisions, but also of the district, and the district, in order to be able to provide that support, the individualized education that they need, needs to be fully funded, which is why I keep coming back to that funding requirements and how do we make sure we cut in areas where we're not impacting students most severely.
Thank you. Heather?
I agree with Ed on that every student has their specific needs that need to be met through the school system, and it gets complicated. Certainly with the special needs section, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is where Section 504 came from. So it is a federal law that protects students from discrimination based on disability. So regardless of the monies, so the monies that we get from the federal government and the state, of course, don't cover the needs that they have. Our school district uses other levy funds to help cover the difference between what's funded and what's not. That can be upwards of $1 million a year for special needs kids in our district. That's a lot of money and a lot of resources. So I do have a comment that at the beginning of COVID, we lost the special needs director. Then the program kind of went through some transition, as everybody did during COVID. And then we have a new director now who's extremely qualified. And there's an increased communication and monitoring going on. The district even had OSPI come in, and they talked to them about how the schools, they wanted information from them. They wanted to show what we're doing and what our ideas are. And OSPI said that they agree with the school district. They like the district's direction and plans for the future. So I think that we have a positive outlook for our special needs kids in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Where do you see additional opportunities for middle and high school students at Anacortes School District in the areas of vocational and technical education? We'll begin with Heather.
I love this one. I do have 3 grown children who decided to take the college course route, and back in they're 25, 30, 32, so especially the 30 and 32-year-olds. In that time frame for the school district, we did a lot of college readiness preparation, a lot of STEM, and funneled a lot of kids towards college. Well, we recognize, of course, I think everybody in this room would recognize that not all kids are college bound. So the school district is trying to recognize that each individual student here in the school has a unique path to follow. So we want to encourage the kids that it's not always about college, it's about life after school and whatever direction that is for them. So thankfully in our school district, we have a great STEM program, right? So, but we also have pathways. This is what the school district called it. They said pathways that they work with starting in middle school and through high school with students to show them the different pathways that they have. That could include engineering, metals, woodworking, computers, marine industry, aviation, medical tech, fire and rescue. I think even Skagit Valley College at the Career Technical has automobile tech So, we do have the Northwest Career Technical Community, Academy here in town. So I am really encouraged by that information. I'm really encouraged that they're looking at kids. They don't need to go to college. They just need to have real world readiness when they leave our school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward.
So I've got a similar list, and I had touched on this earlier, but I'll hit on a few of the ones that Heather didn't touch on. My initial career started in the U.S. Army, so we've got the opportunity for students to not only move through college, but they might not be ready for college today. And I think providing them with other alternative opportunities, whether that be military, whether that be public service, whether that be working in the trades and aligning and partnering with some of the trade unions, with Boeing, who has a vibrant post-high school training program. I think all of those things are absolutely critical. As Heather noted, we used to basically funnel every kid into college, and we expected that and we kind of set the expectation with a lot of our kids that if you're not going to college, you're not a success. And that's absolutely not true. We've got a lot of our folks, whether they're in white collar or blue collar positions, went to college and are not actually working in the majors that they studied in. A lot of their production was learned on the job. And as Heather noted, our job as a school board, our role as educators is to ensure that our students are successful following school. It's not to ensure that they go to college. And that success is going to look very different for each individual student. So, in addition to Skagit Valley and the technical education available there, as I had mentioned, the military, public service, Boeing and the trades, we've got the Washington State Ferry system here, which is understaffed constantly and has a lot of really good careers that you can make out of it in the maritime industry. And so again, we've got a lot right here in Anacortes that we can provide to students. But I think the number one role for us as educators is to let students know that that is a valid choice and that they should explore it during their high school period.
Thank you. Last question. The past tech levy promised to fund 7 tech support personnel. 4 tech support staff were eliminated recently. What state does that leave our technology initiative in? How well do you believe our technology initiatives have performed as promised? We'll start with Edward.
In general, technology in the classroom is behind where it needs to be. When we've sat down and talked to the school district, again, we're operating off of Chromebooks in some cases that are 3 or 4 years old. This is not funded generally by the state. As noted here, it's funded through the levy system. As we start seeing cuts and we go, okay, well, we need to make sure that we fund other priorities, technology in some of these areas tend to be easier to kind of make go away. We need to ensure, number one, going into the next levy vote, that we fulfill our promises to the citizens that said, yes, we're going to vote yes for this levy, and then we didn't use the levy for what it was designated for. So we need to get back to fulfilling the promises that we made. Our technology right now is, again, it's behind. Most of the equipment that was purchased through COVID was done on a lease. So as a result, that lease is all coming due. Everything's going to need to get turned back in. We need to come up with a rotational plan. And again, I think the school district has done a fine job of coming up with a plan to ensure that that technology is refreshed as students go through about every 4 years. So kind of they'll get 3 sets of computers over their 12-year period, 13-year period. The technology initiatives have not performed as promised. They won't perform as promised until it becomes a priority. And when everything's a priority, it's tough to make technology a priority when it's something you can kind of not notice and it doesn't go on a paycheck. Part of our job as a school board is to make sure that the technology dollars are being used in the best possible way and to ensure that we fulfill fulfill the promise we made to the community as part of that levy raise.
Thank you. Heather?
So not to go over that all again, but I will take a different approach. So the tech levy promised to fund 7 tech support personnel. I know during COVID that we hired extra tech support. I don't know if how many tech support personnel we have at this time, whether the 4 tech support staff that were eliminated recently were part of the extra tech staff that we hired during COVID, or whether it's one of the, if they're 4 of the 7 original that were funded with the levy. So that would be a question to see if, like I said, if those 4 came out of that 7, or if those are 4 extras that we hired during COVID. So as far as our technology goes, he did touch on the fact that our Chromebooks are updated every 4 years. What I would like to say that when you think about technology in our school district, of course we have the local levy, the technology levy, which will be up in 2 years. But when you think about what it supports, so we've got tech support, we have tech personnel, we have software, hardware, cybersecurity, online curriculum and tests, teachers' tech stipend to keep up with changes in technology. You know, it's such a wide, diverse area that we use these funds for. So I think they're always looking forward, and technology changes so quickly. I think our school district is doing a really good job of trying to look forward to see how we can best serve our students. Thank you.
Thank you both for participating. Please give them a round of applause. Next up are Port Commission candidates. Bonnie Bowers and Corey Joyce. We'll begin with the 2-minute introductions with Ms. Bonnie Bowers.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. My name is Bonnie Bowers. I was first elected to the Port Commission in 2019. What drew me to the Port Commission was the fact the rising tide floats all boats. I worked as a public employee for 33 years. I retired as a department head here in Anacortes. And I remember the hard times we had back when the budget was not as strong as it is now. When we were asked to cut our departments and cut some programs. It made me keenly aware of where our funding in this city comes from for vital public services, the services that we all depend on. And I became interested because the port is a huge economic driver in our community. Some of our tenants are some of the largest employers in town, paying living wage jobs, allowing people to live here and raise their families here. So as a port commissioner, one of 5, I look at projects and I look at things that come up at the port like this. First of all, as economic development, how many family wage, living wage jobs come with this project we might be considering? Can our infrastructure support this project? If not, what do we have to do? Do we have to recapitalize infrastructure, build new infrastructure? Is this something that private business is already doing, or does private business need our help through leasing infrastructure from us? I look at the impacts that this business would have on our environment, and would it allow for public access as well? And then lastly, I consider fiscal management, and I have to tell you, I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't like to spend money before we make money, but at the same time, most of us have had mortgages in our house, and the port is no different. We do go into debt to finance capital projects. But at the end of the day, our results should be the best result for the whole community, not just the Port of Anacortes. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Joyce.
Hello, thank everybody for coming here. My name is Corey Joyce. I'm running for Port Commission because I've had a passion for the port since I was age 17. I started commercial fishing at Cap Santa and just kind of fell in love for the port. The purpose of the commission is that it's diverse enough to represent everyone. The commission has a void in representation of a specific demographic. I will fill that void in representation. I've been involved in the working port for nearly 30 years with my commercial fishing and now with my marine transportation company. I feel that's an asset to bring a business side to the commission, a different perspective, maybe streamline some things. I've had an excavation company also, so I definitely know how to run a business. I know how to not cut corners, but maybe do things a different way to maybe save some money or cut down on some time. I'm a proven leader as well as a job creator. When I bought my marine transportation company nearly 3 years ago, there was a employee, a deckhand at the time. He turned into being a captain, and I made him a full-time position, which I gave him a raise, living wage job. I then hired another guy, gave him a living wage job, added to the barge after this last year. So with those 2 jobs right there, I've created 5.8 additional jobs. And last, I truly care about this community. The port has been in my heart for years, and I look forward to being your commissioner.
Thank you. First question. What do you want to accomplish in the next 4 years if elected? We'll start with Corey.
Okay, one of the first things that I want to start doing is immediately on rebuilding relationships with the city, county, state, federal partners. Building on relationships like I have with the tribes. The tribes have endorsed me. And I've been working with the tribes, some of the Senate members for the last 10 years pretty close with my commercial fishing. I will ensure that there's more transparency and that the business of the port is easily accessible to all. All of this feeds into creating a culture that focuses on job creation. We need integrity and relationships that are inclusive to all. Doesn't matter if you're a small business, a big business, new to town, or a townie. My focus is on family wage career jobs. To emphasize, we need to invest in building relationships and trust. At the city council meeting on Monday, it was stated by a council member that more work needs to be done on relationship and needs to be outside of the permit application. I mentioned that in the forum at the library, and I was corrected. Even in the best of times, relationship and communication can always improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie.
Thank you. I'm also endorsed by the Swinomish tribe and by the entire Anacortes City Council. So I appreciate what Corey says about relationships. I talked with Councilman Walters today. He made that comment last night, and I heard it loud and clear, and I called him up and I said, is there a problem between the governing entities? And he said, no, we're fine. It had to do with staff and perhaps getting them a clear picture of the desires of what each elected body needs. But what I intend on accomplishing in the next 4 years, something we started 3 months into my first term, was the T-Dock issue. A T-Dock is a 40-year-old dock down at the marina. $10 million of fresh seafood comes across that dock every year. $4 million of other products come across that dock every year. It no longer is serviceable as far as handling the weight restrictions for the fishing industry and for the other commercial industries. We mitigated some of the risk by putting some flooring down, some steel plates, but we have started our planning and permits to recapitalize that dock, to rebuild that dock. And I could talk on that forever, but I won't because I have less than a minute. Other than that, the West Basin, we're doing some redevelopment there, putting in underground power, some easement work, things that we need there to move that area forward as well. And then the big project is our north end of our marina. It was built in the 1980s. We've put some Band-Aids on it to extend the life, but we know that within the next 10 to 15 years that we'll need to do a total recapitalization of the north end of the marina, and that price tag is somewhere between $50 and $80 million. So those are hard, real issues that the commission will be taking up in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. What do you consider to be the best accomplishment and the worst decision of our current Port Commission in the last 4 years? We'll start with Bonnie.
You know, the best decision. Let's start with the worst. You know, it turned out to be good, but I think in the end, we had a decision to make with our yacht brokers, and it had to do with transfer of slips. And we sat on that way too long. It took too long to get that answer. In the end, I think we came up with a compromise that nobody loved, but everyone could live with, and we did some really good things for our commercial fishing community with that agreement as well. So that probably was the hardest decision. I'm not going to call it the worst decision because it turned out well. Things I'm most proud of at the port, we finished A dock. We were able to put new electrical on B dock. We cut our debt by 50%, from $12 million to about $6 million on our general obligation bonds. We completed, well over $20 million on infrastructure projects and cleanup. Revenue continued to grow even during COVID for us, very modestly, but it continued to grow. We were able to do a rent deferral program during COVID for our tenants. And also, we have an outstanding relationship with our city council now, and that really improved, I think, during the last 4 years. We had an issue a couple of years ago, and again, it was something with permits not coming through. Council, commission were willing to talk to each other. We went to our elected and our appointed leaders and said, this is what we meant when we said we want this done. Can you help us and help staff work through the issue? And we did. We were able to do our street vacation at Quiet Cove and Curtis Wharf. It's a temporary vacation for many, many years. And we were able to help the city with their outfall easement as well. So I'm proud of that relationship. I think those are our accomplishments in the last 4 years.
Thank you. Corey.
So I'll start with the worst also. It was this yacht broker thing just, in my opinion, took way too long. I think if the commission was more involved and put the fire out sooner, it would have been better for everybody. They weren't asking too much. They just wanted to do what they've always done, just transfer slips when they sell their business, which Bellingham does. The attorney lets Bellingham do it, and then we were told the attorney says it's illegal. And so there was just a lot of stuff going back and forth on that deal, and it drug out 2.5 years where it probably should have been done in a couple of weeks, kind of like the port ramp deal. As far as, and also, port commissions, the transparency deal, that needs work. I went to a work study, it was almost 2 weeks ago. I went online to see when it was. It said 6 o'clock. So I thought that was odd, so I took a picture of it. And then I was sitting outside trying to get in, and the door was locked, so I couldn't get in. And then I texted John Dumas and said, I need to get in for the 6 o'clock meeting. He told me it was 4:30, but anyway, I caught the best part of the meeting, which was the capital improvements and stuff. So, I didn't miss much, but it's just the transparency thing. And the accomplishments is ADOC. That's a huge deal. One of the best commercial floats that in the area for sure. It houses big berths. BDOC electrical is a big deal. We went through the lockers, redid all the electrical in the net lockers for us fishermen. That was a big deal. We couldn't even see when we went in the lockers. Now you light it up and you can see what you're doing. We can work at night. No extension cords and light bulbs. And I think another great thing is, it's not really commission related, but we have probably the best staff. Like I talked to Jill Brownfield today, and we probably have the best 3 directors, I think, of any port that I've been around.
Thank you. Next question. As a commissioner, how would you work to repair the fractured relationship between the marine trades industry and the Port of Anacortes? Corey.
Well, that's kind of an easy one for me because I deal with the marine trades every day. I've been dealing with marine trades for over 30 years. I have very close relationships with the majority of the marine trades, all the yacht brokers, which I didn't really know them that well, but now I know them after the last couple of years. I know them very well. I would get them together and And just communication needs to be way better. There was communication problems. They asked for items. There's a lawsuit against the port right now because they wouldn't provide items. The marine trades is a vital part of our port. They bring a lot of income, a lot of tax dollars to this community, and having a fractured relationship is just isn't good or acceptable. That would be very easy for me to repair that relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie?
I would agree, it is a fractured relationship. In fact, I think I said that a month ago or so at a forum. We need new people at the table on both sides. Some of the issues that have come up, the first thing that the commission hears is there's threatened litigation. And I know when I was on staff and not a commissioner for a public entity, when you heard threatened litigation, you stopped talking. It became a legal matter. And perhaps we need to rethink that and how we communicate. Corey's right. They need to communicate better. At the same time, one evening we were presented with a vote of no confidence in our executive director, which was a non-binding thing. They just recommended that we do it. That was very hurtful for us as an organization, and at the same time eye-opening that we did, yes, in fact, we had some problems and some things to work on. But we need to be very clear that the Marine Trades Committee, which I think is a part of the chamber, is part of the chamber. It is made up of trades both inside and outside the port, and we should be a member and we should be a leader in that committee, but it does not govern how the port does business. Thank you.
Next question. With the port's mission to create and grow private sector businesses and employment, what do you feel is the port's role in job creation and retention? We'll begin with Bonnie.
Covered a little bit of this in my opening. Ports were founded to equal the playing field for private business because railroads owned the fiscal ports back in the day. We've grown into so much more than just the marine terminal. We have uplands property. We have property on March's Point as well. So the modern port looks at highest and best use of its properties for private sector that will bring living wage jobs to the community. Not only do they bring living wage jobs, but they are environmentally conscious. Some of our tenants are members of Green Marine. The ports historically I feel like we spent the 20th century messing up with the Guaymas Channel and Fidalgo Bay, and we've spent the first part of the 21st century cleaning it up. So any business that we attract, living wage jobs, a good fit in our community, and an environmentally sound company, and one that's sustainable too. One of the worst things that can happen is you can get a flash in the pan business, and I know every once in a while we hear some information about this is a growing industry, they're interested in coming to the West Coast, and then the next article you read about them, they're going bankrupt. So we are attracted to trades and to businesses that have a proven track record of sustainability as far as their business. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey.
Job creation is the backbone of the port with economic development. Transportation, critical elements is what the ports exist as well. As stated before, building relationships and having the understanding of owning and operating a successful business in the port gives me a leg up on making these things happen. I know that there has been at least one job creation transition that happened because a port commissioner had a good relationship with a business owner and knowledge of the community. I will bring this. Sorry, I'm not a politician. I got to read this thing. I've been part of Anacortes for 43 years. I have a clear understanding on marine trades and the working waterfront. I have years of volunteering with schools, APD, fire, police, Proposition 1, volunteer services and businesses organizations that needed a hand, whether it was clearing snow for a memory care clinic, which is my neighbor. I clear their parking lot for them. I do all this with passion and energy. I'm committed to being all in and will serve with passion and energy to champion jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Do you feel transparency could be improved in the areas of information access to full commission meeting packets, agenda input, and citizen advisory committees at the marina and the airport? Please include the current transparency issue with the recent court's decision regarding a record request in your answer. And we will begin with Corey.
Okay, this is one of the main reasons why I decided to run a couple years ago. This is where I believe I've already helped make an impact by showing up to meetings, asking questions. I have spoke about making accessible information on the port's business to the public, kind of like the way that the city council does it. When you have a city council agenda, you can click on the item and see exactly what the packet is. On the port's website, you can't do that, and sometimes it doesn't even have listed what the meeting's about. Subject to study sessions, I have not been communicated. Subjects of study sessions have not been communicated until the very last minute, 24 hours in advance, on majority of occasions. This does not give the public any chance to know what topic of conversation is going to be until 24 hours prior to the study session. We shouldn't have to hunt on our phones to find information, and when it's there, it needs to be corrected. And like I said before, the door was locked. The door should always be unlocked, and I had to text somebody to get me in for an example. That's it.
Thank you. Bonnie.
Well, first of all, for the last part of that question, I can't comment on pending litigation, I'm sorry. But the first part, absolutely we could include transparency. And as a council, if you if you've watched some of our meetings, you will hear as a commission, you will hear, not frequently, but quite often, be sure and get this on the agenda. Would we be sure and add this information to the website? And so, yes, we have some work to do there. And our website, it's interesting because I was a city employee and I thought their website was nearly perfect when I worked here. And then I went to the port and went, I don't understand this website. But having been at the port now for a few years, I get their website. It is a little, there are different icons for different things, and it is not the most user-friendly, but it is not, you can find the information if you look in the correct places. But we can always work on that. The next thing, and first of all, I need to apologize for Corey if we got the study session wrong. Those study sessions we have oftentimes are subject to cancellation if we don't need them. Most of the time we're needing them now because we're doing so much work at the port. We have so much going on. It's not enough to just say subject to be announced. We can put tentative information on that when we have it available. I would agree. We can do a better job with the transparency on our website and our agendas. It is something that we do work on routinely. Thanks.
Thank you. Last question. Do you believe the port should be involved in trying to find a different venue location or property for large public events to replace the transit shed? We'll begin with Bonnie.
Absolutely, we should have a seat at the table. We should be part of the discussion. There are things that we can do. There are ways that we could help. But you know, if government continues to work in silos on different issues, we won't accomplish anything. I've seen Mayor Gear struggle to get a community center going. The pool is struggling to get their bond going to replace the pool. And the port, of course, was going to build a $26 million event center when I first became a commissioner. And no one stepped forward, either in the private or in the public venue, to help with that bill. And it became untenable for the port to do that $26 million project, which would have been our whole capital reserve, or excuse me, our whole bonding capacity to do. It wouldn't be prudent government, and without partners, we weren't able to go forward. So yes, I only speak as one commissioner, but I do believe that there should be a seat at the table for our port. There are things that we can help with and things that we can offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey?
I also agree that the port should be involved in some way with an event center. You know, it's not in our mission statement to have an event center. It doesn't create any jobs. However, I do believe the port should have done better at communicating with the community groups that have held events there, support fundraisers for local students and community. I know people were told about this in a different way, but coming to the table and help solve the problem that we're facing now would have been a better thing to do. There's a difference in leaving people high and dry and bringing people together to start to work through an issue as a team. The port should have been part of that team, being a leader and a partner. So I do believe the port should be involved in some way in event center. My opinion, I said it at the library too, I think we missed it. We should have not gotten rid of the event center till there was a plan for another one, if that's even an option. But I'm just on the fence on this whole deal. I wish it could stay like it was, unless there was somebody coming in there that was potentially going to create a bunch of jobs. You know, until we have that person lined up, I think we should have kept doing events there. Thank you.
Thank you both for participating. Please give them a round of applause. So just a reminder, if there are any questions we didn't ask to both those seats, please feel free to fill out the question form in the back, and we will have time after this to continue asking the audience questions. Next up is the Anacortes City Council candidates. We'll start with a 2-minute introduction with Linda Martin.
Want to say a big thank you to the Chamber for putting this on, and a big thank you to all of you for being here. It says a lot about our citizens to see that the room is packed. Whenever I'm filling out a ballot and I'm looking at a voter's guide, for me, one of the most important things that I want to look at is what's the experience of the candidate. And so I'd like to talk to you in this 2 minutes really quickly about my experience so you have some idea. I am a current planning commissioner for the city of Anacortes. I was appointed by Mayor Gear in 2020, so I've been there for 3 years, 3 years. My career was in the field of education, so I do appreciate hearing from Heather and Ed about their perspectives from education. And actually, I bet those questions would be a little easier. But I was a teacher, a principal, and for 9 years, I was superintendent of schools in 2 different districts, one being Lopez Island. As a superintendent, I think I have a lot of the skills that a city council person uses. For example, I have managed multi-million-dollar budgets and prioritized spending so that we operated within our means. I have dealt with infrastructure items, focused on levies and bond issues and gained public support. But the most important thing, because school is all about people and all about working with people, I can work collaboratively with people of any kind of background or belief. So I think, and in 2017, I was awarded the Washington State Superintendent of the Year.
Thank you. Now for the introduction from TJ Fantini.
Good evening, everyone. My name is TJ Fantini. It's very good to see so many people here tonight. Thank you to the Chamber, Jessica, your staff, and the League of Women Voters for helping to put this on. Some great questions so far. I can't wait to see what we're going to get. I do think that experience is a very important aspect of choosing your candidate. I also think the kind of experience is very important, and I have a lot of experience here in the city of Anacortes working with nonprofits, working with other groups to accomplish some goals and issues that we faced very recently, which I'll talk about. But in addition to experience, I think as a council person, there's something that's even more important than experience, and that's representation. Our job on city council is to represent you. I mean, I look out there, I see former teachers, I see season ticket holders of the theater, I see so many different elements, folks from the hospital foundation, so many different people, our librarian, one of our librarians is here. I see so many people from our community out there, and I think that my relationships with them and our greater constituents at large is a big reason why I could very successfully represent our ward, Ward 3. The other thing that I would say is I do also have experience, not at the multi-million-dollar level, but of budgeting. Our theater, of which I was the president for 6 years, faced a very rough task of only having $7,000 in the bank and trying to survive COVID. I was the president there and had to make some very difficult fiscal decisions to make sure that the 60-year-old theater survived another 60 years, whether that was letting go of certain facilities that were no longer serving us, and that is something that I think can also serve on council, is my experience there as well.
Thank you. For our first question, after the police fire personnel are hired using the new property tax funding, what do you think the community expects to see improved? We'll begin with TJ.
Sure. So I was really excited that our levy lid lift passed with 68% of the vote. I mean, it's hard to pass anything with 68% of a vote these days, so I think that spoke to how important that was to our community. I think what our community expects to see is successful implementation of that plan. So having watched the presentation from both our police chief, Chief Floyd, our fire chief, Chief Harris, call volume and unanswered calls have been a big problem. Another big problem has been a lot of our police and fire staff live off island. And that's not necessarily a big deal when you're working everyday shifts, but when you do have an emergency of some kind, having a more localized staff to respond to it is very key. I think our community expects to see improved call response time, successful implementation of the levy lid lift, which also included purchasing Fire Station 3, which we had rented for, I believe it was 17 years. That is going to definitely improve our budget in that area as we move more into the future. The other thing that I would hope that our community would see is, again, we also have a new unit. It's that responds more to our high volume calls that aren't necessarily fire or crime related, but are more mental health related. It's a social worker and one of our EMS, and that's a new unit. And I think we need more of that kind of help from our city and fire. You know, our firefighters who have endorsed me for my council campaign, they're the ones that are sent out to deal with a lot of the drug issue, the mental health issue, and they are so taxed already. I think that making sure that we successfully implement that levy lid lift by hiring the staff that we're supposed to hire is really what the community wants from us.
Thank you. Linda.
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Fantini just said. I think that the city, in response to approving the levy, I think the city expects to feel safer, that our community will be safer. And how that will happen, yes, by hiring more police, more fire, that's for sure, that's one way. But I think that there are other ways that we can work together as a community and bring a safer environment to our community. For example, I like to walk to Whistle Lake. I'd like to see that I don't have to worry about my car getting broken into. Is there something we could do about that without even the levee lid? I think the answer is yes. Why don't we look for low-hanging fruit? For example, let's just use that as an example. How about putting some solar-powered cameras at the Whistle Lake parking lot? Or how about really emphasizing neighborhood watch and working together as a community? I agree also that we need a really well-trained workforce. As the mother of a firefighter who's been a firefighter for, I think, 17 or 18 years, I know the struggles that the police and fire face just to have a living wage. And I know that we have some negotiations coming up with the the police department. So we need to have living wages for our community members as well.
Thank you. Next question. Manufacturers have provided many high-paying jobs for decades in Anacortes, especially in the energy and maritime industries. What steps can the City Council take to retain and grow its working manufacturing base? We'll begin with Linda.
I was reading in the paper the other day that the Association of Washington Businesses visited Anacortes yesterday with a goal of doubling manufacturing jobs by 2031. I thought that was a pretty lofty goal and good for them. What can we do as a city council? Well, we need to make sure that this city is attractive to those manufacturing sectors of our society. So how do we make it attractive? Well, as a city council, one way we can do that is by making sure that our ordinances are not overly regulatory, probably is the wrong word, but not overly burdensome on our manufacturing community or the people that might think about coming here. Another thing, with 1 minute, let me just think. One more thing that we could do. Well, I think we can emphasize the manufacturing jobs that we already have. It's great to have Janicki here. It's great to have, let's see, they visited Dakota Creek, they visited T. Bailey, and I'm glad that we have them. They didn't visit Trident. I think maybe they should have. I hope I answered that question. It feels like I didn't really answer that one that well.
Thank you. TJ.
Great question. So manufacturing jobs make up about 1 of 6 jobs all across the country. And I think what makes Anacortes very unique is that we have this great maritime industry. And so Anacortes needs to focus on attracting jobs that will serve and provide for that maritime industry. You know, Dakota Creek will tell you that, yeah, they build boats, and that's great, but they need divers. They need tugboats to be able to move those boats and lower them into the water. You know, we are not in Anacortes very conveniently located close to I-5. So we have to focus on attracting maritime jobs, maritime manufacturing into our city. There is availability, there is zoning for it, and there's space for it currently. So I think, again, as a city council member, your #1 priority is, and #1 job, is to set policy for the city. So I would make sure that we are considering in that policy, making sure that it is attractive to those types of manufacturing to come here. We don't want jobs here that can easily be outsourced somewhere else, like to China, because you will find that eventually those jobs will be outsourced to China. So focusing on what makes Anacortes unique and special, that maritime industries, manufacturing of marine. Also, I think there is a marine center over at Shannon Point that offers a lot of training, making sure we have skilled labor and making sure we set policy for housing to be affordable so that we can have. That's the kind of policy that we need to attract those jobs here, is to make sure that they can afford for their families to live here.
Thank you. Next question. For the Anacortes community, what do you feel are the pros and cons of affordable housing, subsidized housing, and workforce housing? We'll begin with TJ.
Lots of oohs in the audience from that one. That is definitely a challenge right now that we face as a city. And I think it's even more prominent because over the next few years, the state is sending down a plan where we are going to be required as a state to come up with 1.1 million new housing units all over the state. And Anacortes is going to have its share of that. I think some of the pros of affordable housing is, well, you'll have a workforce here if you create affordable housing. Some of the cons, I know people are not exactly thrilled. Some folks aren't thrilled with the new buildings with their heights, you know, the 5-story buildings. I actually think that is something that is necessary for Anacortes to be able to grow. And I know that's not always a popular decision, but it's a realistic decision. We have to be able to have more housing, higher density. When you look out at Sharp's Corner, some of that is buildable. It's zoned, you know, industrial, slight residential. I think that that is an area we can then look, our biggest plot of left available land to increase more housing units. I think the other thing that's really important is we have to lean into our nonprofits like the Family Center, like Community Action. They are currently providing affordable housing. They built that wonderful new apartment building. It is already full, and it already has a waiting list a mile long. But I think that they're doing that work already. So to lean more into them and help provide them with opportunities, whether it be through land or policy that allows them to continue that work, will help us a great deal in meeting the requirements that are going to be coming down from the states. Affordable housing, workforce housing, it's all kind of the same thing. We all just want to be able to afford to live here.
Thank you. Linda.
I think starting with definitions, what is affordable housing, subsidized housing, and workforce housing? Workforce housing is self-explanatory, but both affordable housing and subsidized housing have to do with finding places of for people of lower incomes to live. Affordable housing really is something that we need to meet and discuss with developers, because providing incentives for developers or whatever is one way that we will get to affordable housing. Another way to get to affordable housing is through the new state law about accessory dwelling units. A way to get to that affordable housing through accessory dwelling units is by allowing people, it's loosened up the law, allowing people to maybe convert their garage or something like that. And that won't have so much of an impact as that one 5-story building that we all talk about. Subsidized housing, on the other hand, is handled by the Anacortes Housing Authority or by the Family Center. And that's a way to give people a hand up. And I posed an idea at the last meeting that I think if we were to give people without jobs that subsidized housing and pair it with apprenticeship programs, and actually there was questions about that apprenticeship or vocational work. If we could pair those two so that as the apprentice learns, the affordable housing or the subsidized housing goes down.
Thank
I
you.
like getting that bell.
Next question. Describe your current relationship with the tribal agencies on Fidalgo Island and your plans for collaboration with our neighbors in these sovereign nations. We'll begin with Linda.
I love the indigenous people here. And in fact, I really love one particular indigenous person who is in the audience, happens to be my husband. So I think the relationship, though, is very important to understand First People. And I'm really pleased with the things that I have heard, particularly with the Samish people. And for example, the grant that they received for the Tommy Thompson Trail and the partnership that they've entered into with the city on that. I'm pleased to see that they are working on things like affordable housing. And so I would love to partner with them in all of those ways.
Thank you. TJ.
So I think that our city has a very strong relationship with both the Samish and Swinomish tribes. And you do see it through things like Linda said, the grant that we received for the trestle replacement, and they're actually committing even more to a long-term redo of that trestle. I think that's fantastic. The park at N Avenue is another area where the collaboration between the Samish specifically and the city was able to come to fruition. And I think it's really important that we continue to keep those relationships strong. And having those, you know, the park was renamed. I am not going to try to pronounce the name, but it's beautiful. It is, both the park and the name. I think continuing those relationships are key to keeping Anacortes thriving. You know, at the council meeting on Monday night, I was pleased to see the city formally recognize Indigenous Peoples Day through, I think it was a proclamation. That was a great step, because those types of symbolic gestures, they're important to keep those relationships strong and thriving so that we can continue to do collaborative projects together.
Thank you. Next question. The city is the same physical size as it was 10 years ago, but the city budget has doubled in expenditures over this period, with only about 12% more citizens. How would you propose to grow future city revenues, and do you favor increasing taxes and fees on residents or limiting budget increases? We'll start with TJ.
Another great question. I would say that yes. So the city budget was 104 million, then it was 130. Now I think last night we learned it's going to be about $107 million for 2024. I'm not in favor of taxes when we don't have to tax folks. I think, you know, as someone who very recently struggled to get into a house, taxes can really make the difference between whether or not you can afford to live here or not. So I would try to find as many alternative ways to raise our revenue. You know, a couple of the concerns I have would be, you know, we make money through basically three main areas: sales tax, property tax, and sales tax, property tax. There's a third one in there as well. Utility tax, excuse me, utility tax. The water, of course, the water. I have concerns over some of the state regulations that are coming down in regards to the limiting that they're going to do on some of our refineries, because, as you know, the refineries make up about 50% of the income that we get through water. So I think that if that goes away, we're going to have a much higher utility bill because we as residents only cover about 10% of that. The other thing is, you know, we very recently had a super successful project that's still being done, our new fiber internet. And sure, in the short term, there's a lot of investment that has gone into that and a lot of debt that's incurred. But with us already at, I think it's about 45% of people have that, over time, and it's not going to be immediate, that debt will be paid off, and that will be a huge source of new income for the city. I think looking for other opportunities like that will be very important.
Thank you. Linda.
The budget is really important, and just as a person living here, being able to afford to live in Anacortes has a lot to do with how much I pay in property taxes or for utilities or whatever. So no, I am not in favor of increasing property taxes or any tax if we can help it. I'm a pragmatist. When I came to one of the districts where I was superintendent, we were in a world of hurt when it came to the budget. And what I did was open it up to the community to see, and for the community to help make the tough decisions and prioritize what they felt was the most important. I think the city does a fair job of making sure that the budget is open, but it's so complicated. One council member last night mentioned that it seems like we are budgeting based on projects rather than budgeting based on priority. And I really agree. I think we need to think about where are the big rocks? What are the most important things that we need to focus on? Let's figure out how to focus on that. Let me just see, I've got 30 more seconds, just a minute here. The whole idea about planning and being proactive with our plans, just like in any household, if you have a car, you know, you're making payments on the car, but when you've paid the car off, you should keep on making those payments and putting them in the bank so that when the next car is needed, you have the money already instead of going out for more. Go ahead and ding, it's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question. The City Council has recently formed an Economic Development Committee to develop a new economic development strategy for the city of Anacortes. What do you feel are key points that should be included in that strategy? We'll begin with Linda.
Okay, I love this question. I have all kinds of ideas about economic development. We need some clear and actionable plans to maintain and improve our infrastructure. So streets, fiber, water treatment, all of those things, we need to make sure that all of those things are in place because they are really important for economic development. We want to capitalize on many of the events that are going on throughout the city and the partnerships and make those favorable to our businesses, reducing the burden of any kind of fees related to that. Partnering with organizations like the Chamber or the Port to attract more tourists. And I forgot to mention, and the Downtown Business Alliance as well. We want to support a unified look, I think, for the city, whether it's more like a Leavenworth or a Winthrop, or make the Anacortes unified looking. I think that will help in economic development. And just an idea, we have the wonderful murals all over town. Could we develop something like a walking map of those murals that would incorporate the history of our town? I think those things will bring people into our city and help with economic development.
Thank you. TJ.
Great. So there's a lot of ways that we can improve our economic development. The city, the council, the port, everybody is great at coming up with plans. Where the problem, I feel, falls is following some of those plans. A lot of times you see things kind of change midstream. So most recently, I was involved with something that I feel will bring a lot of tourism, a lot of new tax dollars, a lot of grant opportunities to the state, or to the city from the state, and that is we are in the process right now, final stages of application, fingers crossed it will go through very soon, to be designated as a creative district here in Anacortes. Now that will be one of only 14. This is going to provide new opportunities for both grants through the state, as well as signage out on I-5 that's going to lead people to Anacortes being a creative district. It's going to allow for new tourism. This is an area where, for decades, both the theater, Anacortes Community Theater, the arts, Anacortes Arts and Crafts Festival, Fidalgo Dance Works, and Anacortes Music Project had talked about coming together and having a project. Well, that project is happening right now down at Buxton's, right down the street, the new Arts Center, where you can now have classes from both kids and adults. Creating opportunities like that are going to be key for our economic development. You know, tourism plays a big part in bringing dollars to our city. So I would say I would also like to see maybe a little bit more pressure from the council to try to bring back, and I know this seems difficult, but I believe with enough hard work and heart you can do it, the Sydney Ferry Run. I think that is something that could really, really provide, and that is not going to be an easy task, but it is something that I feel we could at very least pressure to get things like that done. Problem.
Thank you. Last question. With the loss of the transit shed as the largest event center for the local nonprofit events and tourism events, what role do you think the city should take to make sure there is a community event center in 2024? And we'll begin with TJ.
Great. So yes, we are losing the transit shed. I was just there this weekend for Beer on the Pier. Also, many of our events have happened in the transit shed, whether it was the Senior Center fashion show, the Schools Foundation. That is a huge loss for our community, but it's a loss that we could have seen coming 3 years ago and started planning for it. In regards to what we can do, I know that there are already a couple of plans in play. So the parking lot, there has been talk about bringing in a very big, beautiful tent that is ran, owned, and controlled by the city that would have heating and high tent space, not something very small and compact, that could possibly go at the parking lot behind Integra, which just recently sold to the Majestic. I know the Majestic is very interested in taking a part in that. That could be a solution. I think another thing, a lot of these nonprofits and events have already moved out to the casino. And I think one of the challenges is going to be bringing them back. Because when we go out there, and I say we because I'm involved in a lot of these groups, to do our events out there, what we're going to find is they do everything for you. They set it up, they clean it up, they have the catering. It's all there. It's all there for you. So I think the challenge is going to be not just finding a solution to the problem, but finding the right solution to that problem. You know, what makes the transit shed so great is that it's a big open space with high ceilings, and it's located right downtown in Anacortes. So you come out of that transit shed and you can go to businesses, you can go to the bars, you can go to restaurants. It provides you know, more for our downtown businesses. So making sure it's in the right place and that it has a lot of the characteristics of the transit shed, fills those needs, is going to be key.
Thank you. Linda.
I understand why the port has made the decision to close the transit shed. I understand that it's not part of their core purpose, but I also want to recognize people like Councilman Young, who is sitting in the back, who has been a great advocate to try and get that transit shed back any way that it can happen. And I would definitely support keeping the transit shed if we could, if there were a way. I'm a practical person, though. Maybe we can't keep it. Yes, Ms. Kaiser and I have spoken about the possibility of a large tent. Actually, we talked about it at the depot as a large tent there, and, you know, that would have to be put up and taken down. I think that that might be a decent stopgap measure, but there may be other places. I know that we want to try and keep some kind of an event center downtown. I agree with Mr. Fantini about sending it to the casino. It's hard to get it back and hard to get the people to come in then. But, you know, we own also, the city owns the heart of Anacortes. I don't know if that's a big enough place or not, but that might be another stopgap place. And what about the movie theater? I don't know. Just some ideas.
Thank you both for participating. Please give them a round of applause. Before we get to the audience questions, now we will do where each of you will be given 1 minute to ask a question of your opponent. Please limit your response to 1 minute. We will begin with Heather Brennan.
Okay, so as most of you have probably recognized, relationships are key to my life here in Anacortes. So my question to you is to serve as a community representative for the school board. What have you done in the last 8 months that you've lived here to progress towards community service and relationships in our community that will help on the school board?
Thanks. So there's a couple things. One, I've become a very active communicant at Christ Episcopal Church here in town. Second is, as you go around and actually go through the campaign process, you get to meet and talk to a lot of folks. And as a school board member, there's two things we're responsible for doing. One is, you know, all the stuff and things associated with blocking and tackling at the school board meetings and making sure policies are passed. The second is to listen to the community. And you know, I could have been here for 6 months or 60 years, and of course, as most of you know, there's been Bartons in the community for the better part of the last 100 years, just not this one. And the ability to listen, the ability to sit down, the ability to come at it with an open mind, be able to take the community's feedback and concerns in and then translate that into school board decisions is something I feel very strongly I can accomplish.
Thank you. Now, Edward, you may ask your question.
So we've been struggling with fiscal challenges at the school district for this year and kind of the next few years to come. If the school were able to find an extra $1 million in the budget, how would you utilize that $1 million?
For me, an extra $1 million, I would put it towards our support staff. I'd get more paraeducators back into the schools so they have one-on-one involvement with the kids, give those kids a safe, supportive environment. And I would give my friend Jay back his 40 days that he's losing on the maintenance side of things.
Thank you. Next to ask their question, Joyce.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is a minute answer or not, but what are the biggest internal and external challenges facing the port today?
Biggest internal challenge is communications. Like you said earlier, we have some great staff at the port. They do a wonderful job. Information flowing up and down, the chain of command, a term that I used to use in my old job, is really, really important, and we have some work to do there. Externally, probably permitting at this point. the port does so many capital projects every year, and a lot of our projects have been delayed because our permits are delayed. The other problem we have sometimes is that because our permits are delayed, costs go up. We had a roofing project where we could not afford the metal, and we had some permitting issues there as well, and some design plans. So permitting is tough, and people don't realize when you cut government entities like the Army Corps of Engineers, what you're doing is you're shooting yourself in the foot because it takes longer to get the permit because there's no one there to process it.
Thank you. Bonnie, you can ask your question.
So, as we previously discussed, we have got some huge capital projects coming up, between $100 and $130 million in the next 10 to 15 years. Being that our debt capacity is about $26 million, how would you go about financing these projects?
Well, talking to Jill Brownfield, she was telling me that our capacity is 26, and as of right now, I think we have 20 available. I would go through each project and see which ones actually, prioritize each project and put them at the front of the list. I think the most important thing, instead of building new structures, is to make sure that we're able to take care of what we already have, the marina. I know that's going to be a huge project to redo the North Basin there, and I think I would prioritize figuring out how to do that sooner than later.
Thank you. TJ, you may ask your question.
So we have both, you and I have both sat back here, I would say several months together, you on one side, me on the other, but always next to each other, it seems like. And we've had a really good opportunity to watch the council in action, to see them interact with city staff, to see their knowledge base of our city and everything that goes on here. What would you say would be, their whole dynamic? What attributes and what do you think would be, other than experience, which you've described extensively, what do you think would be your biggest addition to the council?
That's a great question. And I hate to answer it this way, but I'm going to partly answer it this way. My demographic is like 44% of all of Anacortes residents are of mature age, and I would add that demographic, which is missing at this point. But relationship building is really important. It looks like the city council works well. I don't know if they work so well as a team with the mayor, is what it looks like to me, but I'm on the outside looking in. So I think I could help with just the relationship building, working together as well.
Thank you. Linda, you may ask your question.
So on the city council, I know that we will be making really difficult choices, and you've already spoken about difficult choices that you made, keeping the arts, the theater going. My question to you is, what's your process? Not your decision, but what's your process in making those hard decisions?
That's a really good question. So my process is, one, you have to go out there and talk to those who the decision will affect the most. So if you're doing things in regards to the arts community, you talk to the arts community. If you're making a decision that's based on businesses, I think it's really up to you to get out there, discuss those businesses, talk to them, see what is important to them. I think once you have listened to all of the appropriate stakeholders, for lack of a better term, it is your job to then make that decision. And I think that your values really reflect the type of decision that you will make. I think knowing this community very well since 1987 as both a kid here, a young adult here, and now a new father here, I think I understand the values of this community and what they expect from their council and how they want their city to be. So my process is to listen and then act.
Thank you all for participating in that part. Please give them a round of applause. Okay, so for this next part, I will read off the questions that have been given to me from the audience. And I'll do one question per seat as I go down just to kind of mix it up. So we'll start with the school board. Question is, school board members are traditionally nonpartisan, representing all students. Did you seek partisan endorsement and why? We'll begin with Heather.
That is correct. It is a nonpartisan position. No, I did not seek any endorsement other than individuals within our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward.
So as noted, it is a nonpartisan position. I have been endorsed by a number of both partisan and nonpartisan groups in the community. The approach, however, from my perspective, is I'm going to make my own decisions based upon the facts and data in front of me. And I believe that those endorsements are based upon their knowledge of the fact that I'm going to make those decisions based on facts and data.
Thank you. Next question will be for the port. The port represents all people and is mainly made up of tenant business owners. How will you represent issues that impact the entire community, such as port access for all, even if it means less port profit? And we'll begin with Bonnie.
So you can measure profit differently. You measure capital differently, social capital versus business capital. A great example of that would be the environmental cleanup that we did at Seafair. I wasn't on the Port Commission yet, but the environmental cleanup at Seafarers Park, the old Scott paper, which took decades to clean up and redevelop that into a public park. That is a prime example of social capital that the port has done. The esplanade that we constructed, the port constructed through the marina, that allows walkers to go through that and enjoy that. And not necessarily boaters, people that just like to walk down the esplanade, walk their dog, and look at the pretty boats in the waterfront. That's social capital that we do at the port as well. So going forward, when we consider projects, we always look at, is there opportunity for public access? However, public access is not our primary objective. Economic development is, but it's certainly something that's important to us. And when there's an opportunity to do it, we do it, and we do it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey. Sure can. The port represents all people and is mainly made up of tenant business owners. How will you represent issues that impact the entire community, such as port access for all, even if it means less port profit?
Well, basically, I think as far as access, I think as far as anything the port does, I think we have to have community involvement. I think we need to have, when it's something major, like we had the event center, we had the community involved down at Seafarers, it was a pretty big deal. I don't think that the port should be making huge profits, if that makes sense. I think treating the tenants fairly, I guess I can go into rate increases. Not that that has something to do with this, but I just don't believe in the rate increases just because you can. And that affects the community because the community can't even, some of the community members can't even afford to have their boats in our community marina. I think job creation comes way before profits. Not profits, but I mean, you can break even and still create jobs, and that's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. For the city council position, how many council meetings have you attended in the last 2 years? And we'll begin with Linda.
Okay, TJ, this is something that we've attended pretty much all of them. Yeah, pretty much all. Thanks.
TJ. Sorry. So yeah, we have definitely attended pretty much all of them. I would say in the last 2 years, though, that's part of the reason that I started running for council is because there were a lot of things going on in the neighborhood. Kansas Street, I don't know how many of you from my ward, but Kansas Street is been talked about as a punch through for years and years and years. The new development that Habitat for Humanity is putting in there. And so I started to have a lot of questions, and this would be probably back in December of last year. Started going to council meetings, started to engage with the council, started to engage with the mayor, other stakeholders in our community, and realized that I could add a very good voice, a strong voice, and a voice of action for our community, and a responsive voice. That was one of the big things for me too. I felt it's very important for our council members to be responsive to their constituents. So I'd say almost, not all, but almost every council meeting since December of last year, maybe even actually a little bit sooner, because when we were trying to get the movie theater, when we were trying to push that project through and get the lease changed for that, I came to several council meetings to speak in favor of that as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Next questions for the school board candidates. Knowing your community is a critical part of serving the community. Explain how your tenure as a resident qualifies you as a candidate and has prepared you to serve. We'll begin with Edward.
So there's a couple areas that I've mentioned them a few times that I think bring the school board and the community together. The first one is the ability to listen and to engage and to be open to new ideas. And my approach, whether it's here where I volunteer or as a neighbor, is to listen and to understand. I can't presume, whether I've been here for 6 years, 6 months, 60 years, to know what everybody in the community is going to think and what everybody in the community feels. The more important component is to, one, be able to listen, and two, be able to translate that into policies and approaches for the school board that are going to be effective to educate our children. The second piece, I think, is even more important, and that's the ability to bring new ideas, fresh perspectives to the school board. We've had challenges, whether it's been budgetary challenges, whether it's been educational challenges, that need to be able to be addressed with different ideas, different approaches, and different ways of seeing things. My background as an educator at the college and university level provides a different perspective. My background as a certified public accountant provides a different perspective. And I think those perspectives are important. The combination of those perspectives and then being able to listen to what the community needs and translate that into actionable movement by the school board without presumption that I know what the community wants, I think is an important perspective that I bring to the that I would bring to the school board.
Thank you. Heather.
Thank you. Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, definitely. Knowing your community is a critical part of serving the community. Explain how your tenure as a resident qualifies you as a candidate and has prepared you to serve.
Thank you. Well, I have longevity. I have community connections. I did work for the post office. I worked with the union heavily in that position. I've also worked for the city of Anacortes for 15 years, 12 of those managing baseball fields, soccer fields, softball fields in conjunction with the high school. I've also been board member and on a couple different committees, and that perspective includes fundraising, so going out into the community, seeing what people's needs are, seeing how they can help. I think those are all really quality assets. I also know how to work fiscally with monies that are not mine, as in creating a budget, overseeing a budget, being responsible. And I think the community involvement And the comments that I've heard lately about the finances at the school, the finances in the city, the civic engagement, all these fabulous ideas that people have, I think these are new ideas. I mean, my background is diverse. It is here within this community, but I think I have the diversity to bring these ideas collectively together on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for the port candidates. How do you feel about term limits for Port of Anacortes commissioners and why? We'll begin with Corey.
Well, I think 4 years is a good term. I think it takes, for new commissioners, might take a little bit to get up to speed. I've been going to commission meetings for the last 2 years regularly. I think I've missed a couple. But as far as term limits, I actually didn't know that there was term limits. Like, if you could only run twice, or I don't know. I didn't. Thanks.
Bonnie.
That's a good question. So currently there are no term limits. And I would tell you that it was very difficult becoming a commissioner, and then COVID hit and we did everything remotely, and the learning curve was steep because the port is a complex industry. I'm not in favor of term limits. By the way, this is going to be my last term because I'm a grandmother and I want to watch those kids grow up. I feel very strongly about serving the community. But I look at one of my fellow commissioners who's in the audience tonight who has so much institutional knowledge and a wealth of experience that if that person or someone similar wanted to run a third term, I don't know. They might be the best candidate that we have in the community. And I think the voters need to make that choice about who the best candidate is in the community. Certainly the industry changes, and so as you get farther and farther away from the working world, it may be harder and harder unless you're staying very much engaged. But I would be opposed to term limits for that reason. I think the voters make that decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question is for the city council candidates. Knowledge of the community is a critical part of serving the community. Explain how your tenure as a resident qualifies you as a candidate and has prepared you to serve. And we'll begin with TJ.
Well, I think that your engagement in the community, again, this is a position of representation. It's a position where you need, Anacortes is a very unique place with a lot of different elements to it. And understanding your constituents is key. Engaging with your constituents is key. So I've been involved for many, many, many years, both as a volunteer at several different organizations, and it has taught me a lot. I volunteer, but I'm also on the board at the senior center. So being able to be a board member there has, I go to lunch there once a month with my good friend Jim, and I hear a lot, especially since I've been running for council, from our senior population about what they want and what's important to them. And what's funny is it's a lot of the same things that are important to me. I think our senior population agrees that we need to be able to afford to live here, because when it comes to affordable housing, a lot of our senior population is facing that issue as well. I also think that they believe that having things for our youth here to do is important so that our community stays vibrant and stays connected. Being engaged in all these different areas. I'm an ambassador for the Chamber of Commerce, helping to welcome new businesses. I think I signed up 2 for us at Beer on the Pier. But this is important. Knowing your community, engaging with your community is key to being a good council member. Representation truly is everything. And so, again, that would be my answer.
Thank you. Linda.
I was not born here. I was born in Canada, And I think coming to the United States was probably the biggest thing that my family ever did. I was in high school when my parents moved us here. And the privilege of living in a community like Anacortes has reverberated in my ears for a long time. I spent 2 years in Lopez Island, always coming to Anacortes thinking, wouldn't this be wonderful? I spent, well, my oldest son and his wife opened the Anaco Bay Inn, if you know that. That was back in the 90s. So Anacortes is a wonderful place. But I agree, developing relationships is the most important thing. That's one reason that I want to be part of the City Council. I want to develop those relationships with you. I have been out every day, pretty much, knocking on doors, and as I knock on doors, I tell people, I'm here to listen. Listening is a most important thing that we can do as we develop relationships. Yes, communication is always a worthy goal, but I'm really interested in listening and in learning. And there's lots to listen and learn here. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is for the school board candidates. How can we increase our school enrollment? Should we focus on that instead of cutting back important student resources? For example, librarians. We'll begin with Heather.
As I mentioned before, that's one of my top 3 items. The last 6 weeks have been pretty busy at the school as they get the new school year going, so I haven't met with a couple of the directors that I'd like to talk to about this issue. As I said, I do have a friend at ESD 189 who is one of the representatives dealing with enrollment and attendance, and my goal is to meet with her in the next week or 2 and see what their goals are, because they do represent multiple school districts, so they do have an engagement plan. So that's where I'm headed next. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward.
We face 3 issues here in Anacortes as it pertains to enrollment, and only one of them is really addressable by the school board. Demographically, nationwide, we're seeing declines in student age population, and that's just the normal ebb and flow of the various cycles. The second, here in Anacortes, and we've touched on it here, some of the other candidates, it's very expensive to live here. And we're not attracting a lot of young families into Anacortes anymore. They can't afford to be here. Addressing some of the concerns that were brought up with the city council, those steps will help enrollment. If we're able to bring people with younger families for working age or for working wage jobs into Anacortes, that's going to help enrollment. But the one thing we as a school board can do is make sure that those 200 students that left Anacortes for private schools or homeschools recognize that we have a tremendous resource in Cap Sante High School, that we have a lot of alternative education methodologies right here in town that both will increase enrollment, provide flexibility for that education in the event that parents are looking for non-traditional education pathways, and bring that funding back into the school district. That is the one thing that we as a school board can promote, we can focus on, and make sure that that resource is well known so that we don't lose students who otherwise would be attending Anacortes Public Schools to other schools and private schools. The first 2 are something that we can't do anything directly with, but I'd be certainly on a school board happy to work with the city council to see if we can make it more attractive for families to move here. But we can do something about making sure that our community recognizes the unique educational opportunities we have within a school district.
Thank you. The next question is submitted for the Port Commissioner candidates. How do you intend to balance environmental concerns with financial limitations? We'll begin with Bonnie.
The Port has a long history of partnering with other agencies when we do environmental cleanups and environmental projects. We utilize MOTCA funds, the Model Toxic Cleanup Act funds, which is, if you think of a super fund, MOTCA's funds are on our state level, our super fund monies, essentially. We also, when we consider a site we're cleaning up, we consider the historical insurance. So, little known fact, if a petroleum tank farm was 100 years old and it was insured for 80 years by one company, and the majority of the damage was done during that 80 years, there is historical insurance available to help with that cleanup. There's also DOE money through Department of Ecology. DNR provides assistance as well. We're very good at, and the staff doesn't like it when we use this term, but leveraging dollars in order to make sure that we can accomplish our goals. One thing I want to say about environmental policies, you know, the Port is a member of Green Marine and is doing a fantastic job reducing our carbon emissions. And that is a voluntary program, very little cost to the Port to belong to that. We also have convinced some of our tenants also to join Green Marine, as well as our stevedores. The other thing about the environment that a lot of folks I don't think realize is when we start talking about sustainability economically, bringing business to town, we have to first make sure that we can sustain our environment. Because if we don't have a healthy Salish Sea for marine trades, then why are we even bothering? So it is that critical that the environmental piece be part of what the Port considers.
Thank you. Corey.
As far as cleanups, I think there's only a couple more cleanups to do. I mean, the big one for me is cleaning up, you know, by Wyman's there where the log dump was years ago, and that's where I tie up one of my barges. I mean, that's a pretty important cleanup. As far as funding for those, I mean, there's grants for them. There's, you know, like Bonnie said, insurance companies from previous tenants that were at the Port. But as far as environmental, I'm a huge fan of solar. I think the Port can put some solar up, you know, save some money there, save some, you know, emissions that way. I know we're a long ways away from this new charging station that's been proposed, but there's this big electrical grant out there, and I think they're still trying to see if they still have enough power to run power to the piers, so those boats don't have to have their generators on all night long. That would save on emissions that way. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is for the City Council candidates. In consideration of the local energy industry, please comment on your thoughts regarding long-term sustainability, transition for renewable energy economy. Start with Linda.
I'm going to ask if you would please repeat that.
In consideration of the local energy industry, please comment your thoughts regarding long-term sustainability, transition to renewable energy economy.
Well, I know that we have a comprehensive plan, and in the comprehensive plan, we are mandated to incorporate numerous measures that have to do with sustainability. And so let me just talk for a second about the process and how we would do that, or at least what I would advocate. First thing is to look at the data. What does the data say about our sustainability needs? Next, once we have the data, then we can define the problem. And that's an important step. Define what the problem is. Next thing, we would seek solutions. What are the solutions that are out there? That brainstorming should include community members as well. Once we've brainstormed all those possible solutions and maybe gone out to find other areas where they have worked well, those solutions have worked, then we need to narrow the solutions down. Once we narrow those solutions down, we may have another step bringing it back into the community. And then at some point, the city council makes the tough decisions about what works or what doesn't work. And the most important thing about making that tough decision would be to communicate clearly reasons. And because clearly everybody's not going to be in favor of whatever that tough decision, the sustainability decision would be. And then finally, we would follow up and make sure that, does it work? Whatever the solution is, does it work? What do we need to do? Can we adjust?
Thank you. TJ.
So, in regard to energy, I am not a believer in just having a single source of energy as that being a way that our community, our world will ever succeed. So in that respect, I don't think that a total transition to all electric is going to magically solve all of our energy problems. I don't think that staying with a huge oil and gas is going to solve all of our problems. I think that there is a balance that has to be found there. There's right now, the city is in the process of making a new comprehensive plan, which is going to be one of our big tasks for the upcoming council. And that is, we're going to have to make a lot of decisions about what we think about sustainability. The good thing is the state is providing funding for us as long as we do address those concerns. So it's going to be important to hit certain benchmarks so that we can get that funding for things like electric vehicle charging stations. We need some of those in Anacortes. But I do also think it's very important, having been here a long time, my dad and my brother now, he's a third generation refinery worker. I think it's important to understand that, if our refineries just one day disappeared, that would be a very devastating loss to this community. So working with our refineries to make sure that they can stay solvent and keep doing what they do, but also providing the necessary environmental support, I think is going to be really key for the next council. I have a very vested interest in this, having a new son and planning to be in Anacortes for a very long time. The future sustainability of our energy sources is very important to me.
Thank you. And for our last audience question, it will be for the city council candidates. In conversation of affordable housing, would you be in favor of limiting vacation rentals and or adding a fee per night payable to the city? We'll begin with TJ.
Great question. So would I be in favor of limiting vacation rentals? Well, I would say this first of all. When someone buys a property here, especially somebody who's bought a property before we had limitations on things like vacation rentals, I think it would be very unfair for us to say that you can no longer do that, especially when we're talking about affordable housing, and some people might need that source of income to be able to afford their home. At the same time, I think it's incredibly important that we recognize the balance that we don't want party houses. We don't want, not that we would deal with that not that that would become a huge issue, but I think that the city has to provide proper permitting requirements when you want to do something like this. So very recently, somebody came before council, one of the meetings I was at, and wanted to put a single room bed and breakfast in their house. Well, I don't see that turning into a party house. And what I was most impressed with is the council, the expertise of the city staff that worked through that permitting process to make sure that they were allowed to do it, but also that it would not disrupt the integrity of the neighborhood that it was in. So again, like many things that I believe in, I believe that there is a balance there. So that am I in favor of limiting it? Maybe in some cases, but not in all.
Thank you. Linda.
Actually, that decision was from the Planning Commission. Yeah. Yeah, the Planning Commission makes decisions like that and sends it forward. They make recommendations that they send forward to the City Council. I agree with TJ that a balance is really important. I am not in favor of a whole lot of day rentals, for lack of a better word. And we have, as a city, really limited them. And people purchasing homes should know or should invest the time to look that whether this is an area that is zoned for those day use or night use or whatever they're called. And I think that too many of those vacation rentals take away from the affordable housing that would be otherwise possible. So I agree about the balance. We don't take it all away. We don't just open the doors completely. I think we look at individual situations. But remember, we just talked about making those ADUs a little easier. That's a state law now. And I think that will help the people that are looking for an income source.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your questions, and thank you for your answers. Please give them a round of applause. Our goal today was to present a fair and impartial format that will aid citizens in their decision-making process. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully, and please remember to vote by November 7th. A couple of thank yous before we go to our candidates. Best of luck to all of you. To our Government Affairs Committee and Chamber staff for their work on behalf of the Chamber and the businesses in Anacortes. To our co-presenters, the League of Women Voters, for assisting in tonight's community forum. And to our partners at the City of Anacortes for the use of this facility and technology, and for airing these forums on Comcast Channel 10 and on the city's YouTube channel. Please note that there is an upcoming candidate roundtable luncheon this Thursday, 11 a.m. at Seafarers. Hope to see you there. Thank you all for coming, and remember to vote on November 7th.